Good afternoon readers, it's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf and welcome to another video about Wolf Hall. So on Wednesday I had my final exam for my tropical nursing course, and then we went out, we went bowling, had some drinks, blah blah blah, and then Wednesday evening I got on the train back from London and I went to get to my booked seat and I saw that the person opposite me had this book on the table, and my instinct was to say, oh, I'm reading that at the moment, that's a really good book, but then like my second instinct kicked in, my like very British instinct of, oh my god, you can't talk to a stranger on the train because it will be so awkward for the rest of the train journey, because you'll just like say one thing and then they'll probably be like, yeah, stop talking to me, you weirdo, and yeah, just don't do it. It's not an okay thing to do on British public transport. But then I was like, well, what harm is it really going to do? And I had a magazine, so I was like, I'll just bury my head in magazine once I've said it. And I just thought, you know, I might as well share my love of this book, because I could see the bookmark was right at the beginning, so I was like, I'll tell them that it's good. So I was like, oh, I'm reading that at the moment, and I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, then we talked, me and this complete stranger, talked for the next 2.5 hours. So the moral of the story is, speak to people on public transport who are reading books, because if they're reading books, they're probably a decent person. Yeah, and it turned out that this person had read Wolf Hall once already and was rereading it because of the mirror and the light coming out. So we had quite an extensive conversation that unfortunately I can't remember that much of to be able to like share the enlightened thoughts of the fellow traveller. Yeah, it was really interesting. It was a nice discussion. Anyway, what are we talking about today? Today, yeah, and then we got to the end of the train journey and, you know, it was like back to the British instinct of I just like ran away basically. But it was really nice. A nice end to the day. So yeah, what are we talking about today? We're talking about the ending of Wolf Hall, or rather the lack of ending of Wolf Hall, because this it basically just ends. There's a certain amount of wrapping up of the story in that you get moments of him being a bit more maybe reflective, more back towards his childhood, so you get the idea of things kind of coming around in a bit of a circle, maybe that he's reflecting on things that have happened a while ago, but yeah, it just ends. And I feel like the plot at the beginning of the book is about Anne Boleyn and the rise of Anne Boleyn, and that is the vitally, centrally important bit, and then there's a little bit of stuff tinkering away in the background about the church and things going on with the church. But the plot at the end of the book is Thomas More and Thomas More's trial, who was quite a minor character at the start, and suddenly that is supposed to be the bulk of the momentum of the plot at the last section of the book. And yeah, it's a bit odd, and I had to remind myself that this is not fiction, this is a fictionalized biography, so it's not a life that would, it's not about it parceling up into neat normal chunks. However, I do feel like it would have been more logical to perhaps end the first segment of Cromwell's life with, say, the birth of Elizabeth, as in like Anne has risen to power and produced an heir, but it turns out not to be the right heir, or conversely with I can't remember which comes first, but accusations, either early accusations against Anne or Henry starting to have a crush on Jane Seymour, which we haven't as yet really seen to happen. Like, I feel like the plot momentum should be something to do with Henry and his romantic relationships, essentially. But then on the other hand, that's me looking at it from a very modern day history perspective, and if we're talking about things that are important to Cromwell as a man, then his kind of conflict with More and the importance of the church-related aspects to him are perhaps more important. So yeah, maybe. Yeah, but I did feel like it just ended, particularly because my copy has got a little section at the back that is like acknowledgements in an interview with the author, so I thought there was like a little bit left to go, and then it was just like, oh, he's planning he's planning a trip, and oh, they're going to go to Wolf Hall, and it's over, which obviously is like the suspense and the cliffhanger for the next book. But then she waited 3 years to write the next book, and I have to wonder, was this ever planned as a standalone? Because if it was, I don't now know how it got published, because it's not really concluded in any way. But yeah, it's interesting, and I did really enjoy it. One of the things that I wanted to mention in this video was how I've really enjoyed, at different moments of the book, having little flashes of the female perspective, which happens quite rarely. I said in, I think, my first video how disappointed I was that Liz died, because we lost her insights and the way that she turned around to Cromwell and said, you know, every woman in England is going to be against Henry divorcing Catherine because of the precedent it sets for every woman that can't give birth to a son. And then she died, and then we lost all of that interesting perspective from her. In this section, Cromwell gets ill and the king comes to visit him, and they have this like domestic scene of the king like relating to the different women in his household, and then he goes away and the women turn around and they're like, yeah, actually, I understand why Catherine didn't want to be divorced from him. I understand why women are so keen on him, and it's not just the fact that he's the king. It's actually something to do with his personality being appealing in a way that we don't see from Cromwell, because obviously he doesn't have that kind of an interest in Henry, and he kind of sees him more as like his prince, choose your prince, but also as like a man that he has to work out like tricky aspects of business with, and has to like bring into his business decisions, rather than being somebody that you might have any kind of like emotional relationship with. So yeah, I found that interesting. What else? I think Jason's talked about the sort of references in the section, the Map of Christendom, to the occult history of Britain, where there's this kind of like underlying mythical layer to Britain, and how relevant are those old myths and stories to the New England that Cromwell and Henry are trying to create, and are they even sure that that's what they're trying to do? One other thing that I liked was the reference to the businessmen in London resenting being told that they're not allowed to read the Bible, and this idea that there is now a very successful and well-educated merchant class that just because they can't read Latin doesn't mean that they want to be told that they're stupid, and like that there is now an alternative route that isn't just about Oxford, Cambridge and into the church as being your route to gain an education. There is this route where you can be like Cromwell, you can be a self-made man, and that people like Cromwell are more open to this change in the way that religious texts are delivered, because they're not irreligious. They do believe in God, but they don't necessarily believe in that system, because they see it as something that they can change, because they've not been fixed in it. Anyway, so I meant to choose a question, a reading group question, before I started, but I didn't. Let's see, what have we got? Right, this is a boring section where I'm just staring at a book, isn't it? How valuable is it for the characters to have an awareness of other types of life than their own? Does it generally benefit them to be looking around, or does it undermine their safety and security in an insecure country? I don't think there are two opinions on this. Argue back to me if you think differently. But I think it's an immense advantage to Cromwell to understand multiple walks of life. I think it in almost every debate you can see him drawing on that knowledge that he has that other people don't have. And when people are talking about armies, and he's like, yes, but what's it like for the actual soldier, because he actually knows that. Or nice and brutal, and it's not it's kind of like suggested, but it's not clear, where he talks about whether somebody can keep talking after their heart has been ripped out, and he is able to imply that he has ripped somebody's heart out, so he knows whether or not that's possible. And because he's such a versatile character, he can pull that off. Whether or not it's true, he can pull off the idea that potentially that's something that he could have done. Whereas a character that has always been maybe a bit more fixed in their position, like Thomas More, he doesn't really have the alternative perspectives. And yeah, I think maybe that's one of the reasons why Thomas More is so fixed in his ways and so adamant about things, because he's never had to kind of adapt to circumstances. He's just like been on that one road since he might have gone into to become a priest or whatever kind of monk or whichever. He might have done that, but he got married instead. But since then, he's just been going along this like straight path. Oh, the other thing that I wanted to mention was the theme of parents being separated from their children. So obviously Cromwell has lost his children. I mean, he still has Gregory, but I always get the feeling that he doesn't really care that much about Gregory. That he kind of wants all the best for him, but he doesn't really get him. He doesn't really understand why Gregory is the way that he is. Like he just like finds Gregory slightly alien to him. But yeah, he's lost his daughters, and his daughters kind of like come back to him in memories and almost visions, particularly when he's ill. And they keep kind of like flashing up at him unexpectedly, the way that sad memories do. But then there is Catherine and Mary, the separation between Catherine and Mary, Meg and Thomas More, and also this character, this like briefly mentioned character, Dick Purser, whose father was killed by More. And there is one moment where he suggests that Helen's children might be separated from her and that couple. I can't remember who she is. Is it Rafe? I think it's Rafe. They're like, oh no, we don't want that to happen. But yeah, this is the idea that because Cromwell often has acted as kind of like a foster parent to people, and even Rafe himself was like welcomed into the Cromwell household. And it goes right back to the beginning, and the idea that of paternity and like who stands in as a father figure. But yeah, the power that Cromwell takes when he separates close, loving parental relationships, and it almost makes me question whether he underestimates those parental relationships because he never had that for himself. So I would be interested to see. Obviously, we know what goes on to happen with Mary, and I feel like it never forgives, not necessarily Cromwell, but she never forgives that separation that she experienced from her mother. I would be interested to see whether Meg is a character that continues to exist at all. Anyway, yeah, so thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts. It has been great fun reading Wolf Hall with all of you lovely people. And yeah, I don't have Bring Up the Bodies. I went to the library and they don't have it because they are useless. I didn't manage to get to any like secondhand bookshops recently to try and get myself a copy. I didn't want to buy it new when it's something that I will be bound to find secondhand somewhere. I know Ros will definitely say, oh, but you can get it on the Kindle, but I don't like reading big books on the Kindle because I don't know where I am. I just find it hard to orientate myself in the book with a Kindle. So I'm not going to be reading that just right away. And obviously then I don't have The Mirror in the Light lined up afterwards, so I'm not in a rush to read Bringing Up the Bodies because The Mirror in the Light, I probably won't get hold of it until everyone else in my family has read it. And probably a couple of months after that for it to journey up to Leeds by a meandering route. Yeah, so what else was I going to say? Oh, but I'm going to focus for February on Sagalong. So we are reading the Laxdela saga for the first 2 weeks, and then I am going to be reading the Volsunga saga for the second 2 weeks. So if you also are struggling to find Bring Up the Bodies, then may I interest you in reading the Laxdela saga? And the first video about that will be Saturday or Sunday. I'm finishing nights on Saturday morning, so I may not end up making a video that day because I'll be tired, and past experience suggests that when I make videos when I'm tired, I tend to come across like I hate the book. So I would like to avoid that if possible. Have a lovely week. I'll speak to you soon. Take care.